Welcome here. Glad to see all the faces. We've been looking forward for quite some time to this event. My name is Harry, as Dominic and Harry, I don't know forget it. And we've been running this transport forum for more than 15 years. We're very proud and being at our host, University of Johannesburg today, Professor Lentisa. Thank you very much for your kind support. This university is the founding member of the Transport Forum 15 years ago. And we're very proud being on the premises of UJ today. So let's give UJ a big hand for their hard work. So ladies and gents, just some little bit housekeeping quickly. Those of you who don't know yet, the restrooms, when you exit that door, you walk straight. The first one is the ladies. When you pass the lifts, on the other side is the gents. Okay, so that's the restrooms. Should you follow the session on Zoom, which I think is not really necessary, or YouTube, please put off your sound, otherwise we get the feedback into the system. So I appreciate if you can do that. And then I'll take note that the session is being live streamed to YouTube and Zoom. So we've got participants on Zoom, so to the full sense of the word, this is a hybrid event. And we will hear people from outside talking to us as well and see them, and they will be able to hear you. So during the questions and answer session just now, we will approach you with a camera. Don't get frightened. It won't hurt you or anything. It's just so that people on Zoom also can see who's asking questions and so on. And we hope that the technology will last. Technology is sometimes a thing full of surprises, but we believe everything will go sound today. Like water. Especially in this beautiful venue today. All right. So, ladies and gents, let's have a look at our program for today. Yes, can you give me the program, please? Here we go. So the refreshments and so on has been done. You can see we honored by Airbus being here today, and I don't want to overstay my welcome on the podium here. Elmarie is going to do a formal welcome. I've got people who's flown in from France to come and spend some time with us, and thank you very much for our French colleagues being here from Airbus. They will be properly introduced to you just now. And we're talking about sustainability in aviation, the Airbus path to net zero aviation, such an important topic today. And as I said, we're looking forward to listening to them. And the floor is very much the Airbus floor this afternoon to talk to us and to teach us. And this is going to be great. So I don't want to waste any more time. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Ms. Elmarie Kriel. She's a lecturer at the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management at the University of Johannesburg, and she's going to do the formal welcome. Thank you very much, Elmarie.
Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of Transport and Logistics Studies Africa and the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management here at the University of Johannesburg, it's my pleasure to welcome you this afternoon to this Transport Forum Special Interest Group that will specifically focus on sustainability in aviation. It's so good to see many people attending this event today, despite some challenges we had with the venue. And we have people attending online as well as here in person. And you obviously are all interested in this topic as much as I am. As a department at the university, like Harry has mentioned, we've been proud to be associated with the Transport Forum for many years now. And we host several of these events every year. And we actually value the interactions with captains of industry, professionals in both the private and public sector, as well as our students. And that's the reasons why we have these sessions. As academics, it's also very important for us to remain relevant and to ensure that our programs address what the industry wants. And we've recently gone through program reviews on our BCom program, and we're currently busy with the diploma programs. And our success as an academic entity entirely relies on the collaboration and partnerships we have with stakeholders, such as yourselves. Our departments present various programs within the fields of transport and logistics. And because aviation is one of the modes of transport and it plays an important role in logistics, our undergraduate programs introduce students to the mode of aviation. And then on the BCom Honours program, students can elect aviation as an elective, and they can take the module for a year where they are exposed into more detail into this mode of transport. Our department has also delivered various master's and doctoral studies on the topic of aviation and related topics. So at this point, I also would like to thank Harry, the custodian of the Transport Forum, for everything that he has done, and we acknowledge him for the excellent work he does. And also thank you for being able to change everything so quickly today with the venue that had to change at short notice. So before moving on to the other presenters today, I just would like to share some of the, my observations on this topic, and it's in line with what we are talking about today. There we go. All right, so sustainability. We've all heard about the word sustainability and we hear it quite a lot. But what does it actually mean? What does sustainability mean? So in business, obviously that's the focus of today. The specific focus is on Airbus today. But in general, in business, sustainability refers to doing business without negatively impacting the environment, the community, or the society as a whole. And sustainability in business will generally address two main categories. First of all, the effect that business has on the environment, and then also the effect business has on society. The goal of sustainable business strategy is to make a positive impact on at least one of those areas. Sustainable businesses will consider a variety of environmental, economic, and social factors when making business decisions. Organizations will then monitor the impact of their operations to ensure that these short-term profits don't turn into long-term liabilities. Many companies in all the sectors of industry, all the different industries, engage in sustainable business practices more and more. And none of these strategies that they have are the same. So sustainable business strategies are unique to each company as it aligns with the broader business objectives and principles of that company. Now, if we look at some examples of sustainability in business, there's a few things that you can do to be more sustainable. First of all, you can use sustainable resources in the manufacturing process. And if you look at aircraft specifically, historically aircraft used to be manufactured from metal. And recently, the newer aircraft, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, that Airbus A350 is about 55% composite materials instead. This is just on the outside of the aircraft. So components on the inside of the aircraft can also be sustainably sourced. So that can be the seats or the folding tray tables. All of the components on the inside can also be sourced from sustainable suppliers. You can also optimize your supply chains to minimize greenhouse gases. And then you can also rely on renewable energy sources to power your facilities. This is something that we certainly need to consider with the recent episodes of load shedding that we've been having. Now, if you look specifically at sustainability in aviation, air travel produces about 3% of the global carbon dioxide emissions, and it's one of the fastest growing sources of greenhouse gases. This is according to the International Council on Clean Transportation. The flight with the lowest emission is the one that does not take off. But this is now not great advice for airlines or the airline industry or aircraft manufacturers, because flying is their business. So they have to come up with strategies to improve that. So various international airlines have committed to be more sustainable in the years to come. Delta Airlines, for instance, has committed $1 billion to become carbon neutral by 2030. JetBlue said that they will be carbon neutral by 2040. And United Airlines earmarked 2050 as the year in which they will be carbon neutral. So specifically, if you look at sustainability, there's certain issues that or aspects that you need to address. And I'm just going to mention 3, and I'm sure that my colleagues here have many more to add to the list. So first of all, obviously fuel. Jet fuel is mainly produced from fossil fuels because it has high energy density, which makes it more suitable for aircraft. So there's not been many alternatives in this regard. There has been sustainable aviation fuels that's been introduced to the market, but it's very limited, as well as the supply of biofuels in the aviation industry is very limited. The problem of frequent flyers, people that fly frequently, it's argued that technological advances will be too slow to reduce emissions in air transport. Therefore, measures need to be introduced to reduce the amount that people fly. So we need people to fly less to reduce or limit the damage that on the environment. So on the positive side, COVID-19 might have addressed that issue to some extent because air travel has declined due to the pandemic, but it's surely but slowly picking up again. And then the last one is the new middle class. So the biggest growth in flying and the demand for flying from passengers in the years to come is expected to be outside Europe and the USA. This is due to the fact that there seems to be a significant growth in the middle class, and this is especially in your developing countries. So countries like Africa, Asia, and the Middle East are expected to grow their air travel markets in the years to come. So from my side, I think that's all I have to say. To just get your minds going on the topic. I think let's move over to our presenters and let's hear what they have to say. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Elmarie, for this proper introduction. Very interesting. It's actually sad we only gave you 10 minutes. I think it should have been longer. Very entertaining. Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, we're going to introduce you to Mr. Jerome Chareras, and he's going to introduce the colleagues to us from Airbus. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerome Chareras. It's very difficult to write. It's a very French name. You can understand with my accent. If you don't understand what I say, don't worry. It's the case for 10 years in Africa. Huh? You are not the only one. My colleague will talk about sustainability. I'm sorry, but I disagree when you say people have to fly less. People have to fly better. Just a question of how many of you have seen in their life a French person and talk to him in your life? 1, 2, 3. And without an aircraft today, it will stay like that. And because we were able to cope with an aircraft overnight from Europe to Johannesburg, we are here today to talk to you. I'm going to be quick. I'm the Airbus aircraft commercial face in South Africa. Not a pretty one, but it's the only one I have. And my job is to sell the aircraft to South African Airlines, all the airlines, South African Airways, Airlink, and to convince them that our aircraft is the best, which is not very difficult compared to what my competition is proposing. What I want to tell you, just to talk about a little bit about our company. Airbus is a worldwide company. We have different factory offices in all the continents. We have 95 different nationalities. 95 different nationalities, but today we are here to talk about sustainability. We're also a company looking for future and new talent. And you as a student, look at us, look on our website, look on our possibility. We are always very kind to have people from outside. We have several South Africans working for us in Toulouse, in the US. We have people from Zambia, all over Africa. And don't look only in South Africa, even if we are present here, but look also in our possibility around the world. On the Q&A, if you have questions, please feel free to ask any question you want. We are here to answer. We travel a long way. And be efficient, ask any question you want on our product, on our policy, anything. And then I leave the floor to you, No, it's Corinne.
Corinne.
To start about the sustainability and our plan for today and the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerome. So Corinne starts. Ladies and gents, we're keeping the questions to the questions and answer session after the comfort break, so that they can focus on their presentation. Thereafter, we're going to move this podium a little bit out of the way. You can see the panelists here clearly, also the Zoom people, and then we'll move on to questions and answers. All right, so bear with us. So yes, Corinne, thank you very much. He's the Director of Environment and Sustainability Marketing at Airbus. He's going to talk to us about perspectives as in from a original equipment manufacturer's perspective.
Okay. Is it okay, Harry?
They're going to put it on there for you. Oh, you want to say sure. So you can share these slides, technical. Obviously, we'll forward it from that.
So, thank you for the introduction, Harry. Thank you to the University of Johannesburg for the welcome. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to everybody for being here and everybody online. It's a privilege to be able to speak to you today. It was a great introduction to sustainability to be received. So thank you. That saved me a little bit of time at the beginning of my presentation. So I'll speed through the first couple of slides because I did want to just think about sustainability a little bit because it's a very fashionable word. But what do we really mean by it? So here is one very simple, global, generic definition, meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. It's fine, it works well, very neat. But with regards to sustainability for aviation, I don't feel that it really captures the importance of what we bring, which Jerome already hinted about when he highlighted the fact that actually, how can South Africans speak with French people? It's thanks to aviation. And I think that has real value. Sometimes it's actually quite quantifiable because we trade as well. And we support our economies thanks to aviation. So I just sort of adapted the definition to benefiting from mobility and trade today without compromising the ability of future generations to do the same. And Joop, when he speaks after me, will give a couple more illustrations of actually what aviation can do for society in perhaps ways which are not immediately obvious. It's not purely about traveling and trading, but there are many indirect benefits which flow from that. So I'm very happy that the Airbus purpose statement very well reflects this will to be sustainable. So our purpose is to pioneer sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. So as we spoke about, Anne-Marie already spoke about reducing the impact, but also providing a positive good. And so for us, the positive good is the safe and united world, what we do. You might wonder if that's not a bit of an exaggeration or woolly words, but if we think about that mobility and trade that we provide, people that are involved in that, participate in that, they're keen to understand and cooperate internationally. Without that, you might be inclined instead towards lack of understanding or intolerance. So actually, this industry actually unites the world in a very real sense with very real benefits. And for us, this is more than just a slogan. Sustainability is in our purpose, but that purpose is actually cascaded across our organization and down through various levels, through group strategy, through some specific sustainability commitments, and then onwards to an array of initiatives, procedures, KPIs, training for the workforce, for example. It's a whole array of activities, not least the variable remuneration of some of our top executives. depend on achieving these sustainability objectives. So it's really embedded in what we do. We are going to look really today at the first of those 4 sustainability commitments, lead the journey towards clean aerospace. Now, of course, as Anne-Marie highlighted, there is much to sustainability, and it's not purely about environmental protection. We often talk about ESG, sustainability, environment, societal, governance. For us, we've actually got 4 specific commitments. Essentially, the environment is dealt with the first of those. Respect human rights and foster inclusion, build our business on the foundation of safety and quality, and exemplify business integrity. Between them, they address the societal and governance issues that we need to take on board and deal with proactively. So leading the journey towards clean aerospace is really the core of my following slides. What I'm going to do is, first of all, give a brief overview of how the industry, not just Airbus, but airlines and other stakeholders in the industry, are increasingly aligned in terms of the sustainability objective. I will talk briefly about what Airbus is doing to reduce its own footprint, the footprint of its own industrial activities, but I will spend more time dealing with how Airbus is helping airlines reduce the impact of their operations, and so the whole industry, in terms of what airlines do as well, becomes more sustainable. And in doing so, I'm probably going to refer to organizations that you may not have heard of or may not be so familiar with. There's the International Civil Aviation Organization, International Air Transport Association. There is an organization called SBTI, Science Based Targets Initiative. These organizations often have very good websites, and it's very, I would recommend that you dig into the sustainability pages on those organizations. CDP as well, you will see mentioned. Have a look there. It's a very interesting website. And also the Airbus website. Some of the initiatives that I'm going to talk about, you can find more information on the Airbus website to dig a bit deeper on those as well.
Corin, sorry, I received a message from the back asking you to speak up slightly.
Okay, right, I will maintain my efforts to speak up, but those at the back, feel free to just wave or gesture if I'm not doing well enough. Okay, you have to help me by letting me know. Okay. So leading the journey towards clean aerospace. So it's a journey which actually began already a long time ago, in the sense that aerospace, the aviation industry, I mean here, has become cleaner since the jet age began, very demonstrably. Okay, a long time has passed. Just looking at the left-hand side of the chart, we can see that since the dawn of the jet age, so we're talking about the 1950s and 60s, the CO2 emissions, carbon dioxide emissions, have reduced by 80%. That's on a passenger mile basis, of course. Need to be clear about that. The number of passenger miles actually performed has increased to a much greater degree, so the total emissions have actually gone up. That's something which we now will have to address. But the second, third, and fourth on the left-hand side, carbon monoxide, nitrous oxides, and noise, those have also reduced very substantially. And actually, that was the main focus of the industry for many years, because in a sense, CO2 is a direct function of fuel burn, and that kind of looked after itself because we all wanted to save fuel, and we all had an interest in burning less fuel. But those second, third, and fourth items have actually been regulated for many years, and the limits have actually reduced progressively. What's different now is that while we still care about those other three, and by the way, those are most relevant in the airport environment during the takeoff and landing phase of operations, we're also caring more now about CO2, and actually we see the first regulation now coming into force with regard to CO2 emissions performance of aircraft. So the way forward is with the focus on CO2, on carbon dioxide, and two important reference points. The will expressed through the International Civil Aviation Organization to cap emissions, or rather neutralize emissions, with offsetting at the 2020 level through the CORSIA program. CORSIA stands for Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation. I won't go into any more detail about it during this presentation, but that's an important measure, global measure, which is coming into force during this decade. But then actually not just capping emissions, but actually reducing CO2 emissions to zero by 2050. And that's what we're going to focus on. So how we have got to this situation where we are collectively targeting net zero emissions in 2050, it's really happened. The momentum has built actually during the COVID lockdown, despite the fact that you might have thought that airlines were actually more concerned about their survival than addressing sustainability. So it's interesting that sustainability has actually remained, in fact, built its momentum in terms of commitments during this period. So I won't go through all of the examples here, but you can see a number of important airlines announcing a commitment to net zero, generally by 2050, sometimes by 2040 or 2045. Some of them refer to net zero, some of them refer to carbon neutral, and there's an interesting distinction to be made between the two. But I think the culmination is really the top right hand side of the chart. It's October last year when IATA collectively, IATA is the Association of Airlines, and represents I think more than 80% of the seat miles flown globally. It's around 300 airlines. They committed collectively to net zero in 2050. And that has been followed. The next slide is just actually referring to that commitment last year from IATA. To add to that, literally a couple of days ago in Montreal, during the ICAO assembly, ICAO, separate from IATA, ICAO is the UN, United Nations body that oversees global aviation. They actually adopted a resolution to the same effect. In other words, achieving net zero aviation by 2050. So the industry is very much aligned with this objective, but how do we get there? The next step, once you agreed what the destination is to start thinking about milestones along the way. What is the roadmap to achieve that? And here we have some examples. In fact, if I understand correctly, well, as of the end of September, this was the complete list of airlines that have committed to the SBTI initiative. In other words, they've committed to submit their own customized targets towards SBTI. SBTI I will explain on the next slide, but it stands for Science-Based Targets, Science-Based Targets Initiative. And actually, this is the next step. It's all very well to commit to net zero by a certain date, but then the next thing you want to do is to demonstrate to your stakeholders that you've thought seriously about how you're going to achieve that, and that your roadmap to achieve that is actually consistent with science-based climate change targets. That's what the Science-Based Targets Initiative does. So 24 airlines have actually submitted or rather committed to the process, and as of now, 5 have had their midterm targets approved by SBTI. I said there will be a brief slide on Science-Based Targets Initiative. I won't take the time to go through all of this, but as you can see on the top left, it's actually an alliance between World Resources Institute, Worldwide Fund for Nature, United Nations Global Compact, and CDP stands for the Carbon Disclosure Project. Carbon Disclosure Project is a project which encourages and centralizes corporations submitting their carbon dioxide emissions. So it's a reporting standard for carbon dioxide emissions. Obviously, they are in a good position to contribute to this activity, which is concerning carbon dioxide emissions and roadmaps to reduce them. So I will just take a brief step away from back from carbon dioxide for a second before launching back into it, because I want to explain that addressing carbon dioxide for us is actually part of addressing the life cycle of our products and their environmental footprint. Obviously, any product has an impact at various stages in its life cycle, in particular the manufacturing, and then the operation, and then the end of life. For aircraft, that equation is a little bit simplified by virtue of the fact that our products are in service for a long time. and their footprint is very largely on the operational phase because they're very carbon intensive. So they use a lot of energy during their life cycle. So for us, for our products, it's that segment 4 where the biggest impact is felt. But during all of the other activities, there are things we can do to address sustainability and reduce the environmental footprint. So beginning with design, of course, and this doesn't necessarily mean design of an aircraft, it can mean design of an upgrade to an aircraft or some service associated with supporting aircraft. Efficiency has always been a key driver. Now we need to take into account all environmental impacts. And there's actually a process now to assist with that. It's called life cycle analysis. I won't take time to go into detail on that. Life cycle analysis is a means of dealing with different impacts. So, for example, you might ask yourself, which of these apples in the supermarket are more sustainable? You might have some apples that have come from a very long way away, so there's a big transport impact, but they might be in recycled packaging. You might have some apples that have come from nearby, but they're in plastic packaging that's not going to be recycled. So which are the better apples to buy? So these are the kind of things that life cycle analysis can deal with by dealing with more than just 2 measures, but 15 or 16 measures. In the case of aircraft, it is the usage phase and it is the climate change impacts which are predominant. However, let's say we're making a modification to something in the cabin. We've got 2 options. They both weigh the same, so they're not going to make any impact on the fuel burn of the aircraft. We could use life cycle analysis to identify which is the better way to go. In the supply chain, most of the footprint in the production of the aircraft comes from the supply chain, not actually what we do in our factories at Airbus. So we can't claim to be giving a sustainable product if our supply chain is not sustainable. So essentially, we have processes whereby we bring into place the expectations, the sustainability expectations that we have for ourselves. We can essentially impose them on the supply chain. And that's not difficult to do because the supply chain is also willing to become more sustainable. But through our procurement procedures and through contract renewal, we then have the opportunity to validate various aspects of the sustainability of the supply chain, be it working conditions, be it handling of hazardous materials, and so forth. Then in the manufacturing, I've got a couple of slides on what we will do on the manufacturing. But manufacturing and supply chain together gives us our sustainability credentials. Our customers want to hear about our sustainability credentials as well. So on the manufacturing, there's 2 slides which I will go through quite rapidly. We have reduced our carbon emissions, so the 3% and 5% reductions, they're the carbon emissions reductions in our operations. And we're targeting to increase that to 63% reduction on a 2015 base by 2030. Very ambitious. We recently increased the ambition. That was because we wanted to be able to have a target which was aligned with SBTi standards. But what we're talking about here is scope 1 and 2 emissions. That means emissions that we control. It's part of our processes. And you can see some illustrations at the bottom of the chart about some of the means that we have to achieve that. But we have to put this into context. We have to put this into context of the downstream emissions. So this chart deals with scope 3 emissions, scope 3 carbon emissions. So those are emissions elsewhere in the value chain, either upstream or downstream. As you can see, the total is 475 megatons on an annual basis. That reflects all the aircraft that we delivered in 2021 and all of the emissions that they are likely to create during their useful life. You can see the band on the right-hand side. That illustrates our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And you can see that the scope 1 and 2 that we talked about was the 0.8 megatons. It's about 0.2% of the total. And with the scope 3, 98% is in operations and only 2% for the upstream supply chain. So this is all about transparency. And these are the figures that we report using the guidance of Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, submitting our results to the Carbon Disclosure Project and also targets to Science-Based Targets initiatives. It's all about transparency because for us, we need to be seen as a transparent. The sustainability credentials that we have need to be recognized by our stakeholders, whether they're you, whether they are airlines, whether they are investors, whether they are financiers. And what we're doing applies to any modern business that has a strategy which is going to be sustainable. But the scope 3 emissions, and I'm going to speed through some of these slides a little bit more quickly in terms of what we're, how we can achieve them. What this chart shows is what would be the global airline CO2 emissions. How would that profile look like if we carried on with foreseen growth rates for air travel, in this case 3.1%? What would those emissions, how would that emissions profile look like until 2050 if we stuck with the fleet efficiency, the efficiency that we have in our global airline fleet in 2019? Well, it would more than double, as you can see, thanks to that growth rate. So there are actually 5 ways we can reach net zero. Now, there are various scenarios and different sources. This source is principally from the Air Transport Action Group. There are various scenarios with different sizes of segment. And you will talk about the first segment. That is fleet renewal, so replacing less efficient aircraft with more efficient aircraft. We also have disruptive technology, more efficient operations and infrastructures, sustainable aviation fuels, and offsetting carbon. I'll deal first of all with sustainable aviation fuel and disruptive technology, because they're the largest segments, and actually it's things which are happening today. Sustainable aviation fuel. What people often misunderstand with sustainable aviation fuel is how the carbon emissions are saved. The carbon emissions are saved in the life cycle. Aviation fuel is a hydrocarbon. It contains hydrogen and carbon. It's kerosene specifically, so that's between diesel and petrol that you might have in ground transportation. And sustainable aviation fuels are also kerosene. So when you burn a kilogram of kerosene in a gas turbine, you emit 3.16 kilograms of CO2. You can't avoid that. But if elsewhere in the life cycle carbon dioxide has been absorbed, then that is a sustainable fuel. The difference between sustainable aviation fuel and conventional fuel is that conventional fuel comes from fossil sources. And that photosynthesis was done millions or billions of years ago, and therefore is of no use today, no use to us today. But the CO2 which is absorbed in the life cycle through the feedstocks that we use in sustainable aviation fuels, we can balance that against the CO2 that is emitted when the fuel is burned. There are some major challenges, however, to sustainable aviation fuel. That is essentially the availability. Production is very small, very much smaller than what the global fleet requires. The cost is currently very high. Of course, those two issues are linked: low production rates, low purchase rates, high costs. And the distribution is very poor. It's available only in relatively small number of airports around the world. So some airlines that are beginning to use sustainable aviation fuel in their operations, they're actually using, taking as much as they can from one location, but using none elsewhere in their network, because they might have a target to use 1% sustainable aviation fuel. How can you do that? You upload sustainable aviation fuel at one part of your network. And a lot needs to be done. So between now and 2050, so it's a long time, but $1 to $1.5 trillion will need to be invested in the production of sustainable aviation fuel. Companies that already produce fuels are best placed to do that, but it's different, it's specific infrastructure that is required. And policies as well. Policies need to be put in place to facilitate this. And that is progressing very fast. There's some good news here as well. The good news is there's a lot of collaboration with, for example, the Clean Skies for Tomorrow organization, which is a collaboration of engine manufacturers, fuel providers, airlines, working together to develop means of overcoming the hurdles. For example, policy toolkits. They produce a very interesting policy toolkit you can find it online, which governments around the world can take on board in support of promoting the upscale of sustainable aviation fuel production. Many airlines have made announcements. This is just one example. The 21st of March example, airline alliances committing to burning 20%, to having 20% of their fuel burn being, 10% of their fuel burn being sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. It's an ambitious objective, but it's one which the industry is coalescing. I just check with, if I may, with you. Is it okay, you, if I take 5 minutes from your slot?
Oh, go on
Yeah.
then.
All right. So I still got another 5 to 10. What is Airbus doing in this business? Well, sustainable aviation fuel is available only in small quantities today, but we will eventually need to be able to use it neat. So today it's usually blended in rather small percentages, blended with fossil fuel. And it's possible to do that up to 50%, but very few people are able to find or pay for such quantities. As the scale up increases, we need to make sure that the fleet is able to burn 100% sustainable aviation fuel. Now, there are many ways to do this. You can add something called aromatics to your sustainable aviation fuel, and then it becomes Jet A. There's nothing to do. That's called a drop-in fuel. You can use it just like any fuel you can today. There are other ways to do it potentially, where you have additional environmental benefits, because the certain sustainable aviation fuels could burn cleaner. So we're working on that with our partners and engine manufacturers and other research agencies, and using our flight test aircraft to develop these capabilities. There's a link between sustainable aviation fuel, however, and hydrogen, which is the next subject I will deal with, because it's just sustainable aviation fuel and hydrogen are both part of future fuels for aviation. So just beginning at the bottom of the chart with biomass-based fuel. So the majority of sustainable aviation fuels produced today are biomass-based. So they're using, for example, agricultural residues to create sustainable fuel. The quantity of feedstock for that is finite. Different views on how much feedstock there is, which is truly sustainable and not in competition with food production. But at some point, we will need sustainable aviation fuel to be supported through other means. The way we can do that is with low carbon power, so renewable power, wind and solar, which are ramping up exponentially. You can combine that with carbon captured from other sources, for example, direct air carbon capture, or carbon captured from factory exhaust chimneys. You can actually create synthetic fuel, and that's called often called e-fuel or power to liquids. To do that, you also need hydrogen as an ingredient, but hydrogen can also be used directly as a fuel, potentially on some new aircraft types, and I'll just show you those briefly now. After making a quick reminder that hydrogen, actually you can contribute to aircraft propulsion in 3 ways. Through being an ingredient in sustainable aviation fuels, so synthetic kerosene in combination with carbon, by generating electricity through hydrogen fuel cells, and also through simply burning it as we do kerosene. So you can burn hydrogen in a gas turbine. The ideal gas turbine would be optimized somewhat differently, but it's not breakthrough technology that's required to burn hydrogen in gas turbines. And on the right-hand side of the chart, those 2 means of using hydrogen, these are both envisaged for our zero-E concept aircraft, which are zero-emission aircraft, which we envisage bringing into service by 2035. It's still quite some way away, but there's a lot of technology that needs to be developed between now and then, and also hydrogen ecosystem, which needs to be developed between now and 2035. That's what we're beginning to work on. So these are concept aircraft. The aircraft that we actually launch later in this decade is not going to be exactly any of these 3, but it could look like one of these 3. What you will notice is that the size, you can compare that with what Joep is going to tell you about our current aircraft. The range capability is relatively small. That's because of the specifics of hydrogen. It's a fuel which has good energy density from a weight point of view, so it's very light, but it takes up a lot of volume. So actually carrying that amount of fuel is actually more of a challenge and would require very specific aircraft design. Just to give you an idea of some steps along the way, in 2026, we will fly an A380. The A380 is not going to be powered by hydrogen. It has its 4 kerosene-powered engines, but you can see that we're going to mount a smaller hydrogen engine up high on the fuselage to test hydrogen combustion in flight. And we're not just testing the hydrogen combustion, we're testing the fuel system, because we're going to use liquid hydrogen, which is cryogenic, stored at -253 degrees. The fuel system is therefore cryogenic, so it's a completely new fuel system for us to develop. So that's a part of the reason why we're going to be needing to fly such test aircraft. We're not exclusively working on hydrogen. We will also use an A380 to test radical new engine technologies, such as this open fan technology, around the same time frame. Also, for new aircraft configurations that would be powered by kerosene. We're also testing aerodynamics. I tend to think that aerodynamics has been studied so hard and for so long that we must have done everything there is to do and found the perfect solution, but apparently we haven't. I think this aircraft is going to be constructed in 2023. It's actually a modified Cessna Citation with completely new wings, and it will fly, I think, in 2024 to test very radical aerodynamics. And we're developing our industrial capabilities as well, because there's no point having radical new concepts if the industrial system is not capable of delivering them. Essentially, we don't want the industrial system to be a constraint on anything we would like to do with a new wing. And if we think about the hydrogen aircraft, the wings will no longer be storing the fuel as they do today. That would need to be stored in tanks elsewhere. So that gives a whole new range of opportunities that we might want to make sure we are able to realize. And this is a kind of a fun and kind of immediate thing that we're working on. As for this year, this should actually start happening. This aircraft is already flying. It's a glider, rather unusual one because it has a turbojet mounted on the back. We've actually taken a couple of these gliders and we're going to test hydrogen in this turbine. We're actually going to fly 2 aircraft. One will burn kerosene and one will burn hydrogen. We'll fly them together. We'll have a chaser aircraft monitoring the exhaust from those aircraft and the properties of those exhaust plumes, which is very important for understanding the benefits that hydrogen could bring with regard to the non-CO2 effects of aviation. That's something I haven't addressed today, but CO2 is the principal effect that we understand, but there are other effects in terms of climate change that aviation has, we globally call non-CO2. And this helps us to improve the science, improve the understanding of those non-CO2 effects. So finally, and I'm almost done before handing over to you, operations and infrastructures, there's a lot we can do. So this chart is very busy. So I will simply say, in every stage of the flight, and this chart is representing a typical flight, there are things that we can do to improve the sustainability, whether it's noise, waste, or carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. We can still find some more percent, 5–10% maybe, if we combine all of these things together. Hello flight, we can fly aircraft one after the other. You've probably seen geese flying. They fly one after the other, and the goose which is in front is doing all of the work, and the goose which is flying just behind and to the side is only doing 75% or something like that, because he's benefiting from the turbulence of the goose in front. We can do the same thing with aircraft. It's a challenge in terms of air traffic control, but it's something we're working on. And again, we can gain some more percent here in terms of our emissions. And finally, carbon capture. This isn't directly associated with the airline operations, but it's a nascent technology capturing carbon dioxide from the air. Airbus has begun to invest in this because for that last segment in that net zero roadmap, that last lowest segment, to the extent that we're going to need to rely on offset and carbon removals, we would prefer to do carbon removals than offset. And carbon removals is something that the aviation industry can invest in, and we're beginning to invest in it. And we hope we can then demonstrate to regulators that that's something that can actually be genuinely make a genuine contribution and can be recognised by regulators as part of the path to net zero. Here's a summary chart, which I won't detail because it summarises what I've said with regard to the top level means that we can address those 5 domains to reach net zero, but we'll leave that with you. And then my final chart was concerning transparency. Transparency is very, very important in sustainability because if you're not transparent, or if you give the impression of being transparent, then you're likely not to be recognised for the sustainable oriented organisation that you are. And it begins with voluntarily, transparently reporting your impacts. It's something we do. That's best done through common standards across the aviation industry, but also across industries, so that, for example, investors, bankers that want to compare one industry with another, one business with another, have a common standard, a common approach to understand environmental impact, a common understanding of a common presentation of how these impacts are made. And finally, when it comes to talking proactively about what we're doing on sustainability, which is also important, like we're doing today, we have to be very accurate about it, and we have to give the right context. If not, we will be accused of greenwashing, and that is counterproductive. And so I hope you will have the impression that in presenting what we do today, we're also being transparent about sustainability, acknowledging the impact, as well as trying to tell you about what we're doing to address it. So overran my time a little bit. Apologies, you. We can move on to the next one. I click on. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. Harry's already holding up a sign that says 10 minutes, so, so thank you. Right, do you want to put up my presentation? Thank you. Okay, oh, do I need to keep talking? Okay, sorry. So I won't redo the welcome, but thank you, everybody. One thing that we didn't mention is that everything that you saw on the screen, we will leave with you afterwards. So I didn't see too many people taking notes, so obviously you knew that already. But everything that we're showing, we will leave with you. So that's me. Corinne told us sustainability out to 2050, but the question is, what can we do right now? So why don't we just stop flying? If that's the issue, why don't we just stop flying? So in my quick presentation, I'm going to discuss why don't we just stop flying? And in fact, I don't believe that's the answer, but also the other question is, will we be flying more in the future? And then it comes back to the real question, what can we do right now? So why don't we stop flying? Well, I think we realized this during the pandemic. People want and need to travel. We're linking families and friends. We're enabling tourism, connectivity as well, trade, supporting economies, and connecting. I would have said connecting cultures and societies, but now we're reconnecting. We haven't been able to travel for quite some time. When the airspace opened up again, when the restrictions were lifted, what were the first things you all did? You traveled. You wanted to go and see people that you hadn't seen for quite some time. But also, and here I'm talking especially about the continent, air transport and traveling benefits Africa. It enables socio-economic development. Two aspects to this, economic growth and what I'm calling social benefits. So because of air transport, we have global trade, we have e-commerce, we have delivery of services, better productivity, globalization of production. Air transport generates direct jobs, working for an airline. It generates indirect jobs, supplying services to the airline. it allows tourism and travel, and it encourages foreign direct investment. So these are the economic benefits. This is literally money coming in. What about the social benefits? So there is the health and humanitarian, and we saw that during COVID. Air transport let us bring in, first of all, masks, then later on vaccines. All of this is made possible through air transport. It's educational opportunities. Now, I'm not saying that education is not good. I wouldn't be saying that right here in the University of Johannesburg. But people are coming to you from elsewhere in Africa, from elsewhere in the continent, to come and study here and to get an education here. I don't think they came by bus. I hope they didn't come by bus. It's air transport. It's also essential for services, healthcare, food supplies, and the other thing, yeah, life quality improvement. People want to go and do something different. They want to go away. I mean, how many of you here like to go to Mauritius on vacation? Or one of you aspire to, once you finish your studies and you're in a good job, to go to Mauritius on vacation? Again, that's air transport. I mean, if you can't tell, you know, I'm promoting the sale of aircraft very discreetly. But let me give you a concrete example. Okay, sorry, this is East Africa, this is Kenya. But in Kenya, a hectare of flowers generates $150,000 per year and an average of 25 jobs. Kenya produces 25% of the world's flowers. In 2018, they had 600,000 employees. And the industry finances its own jobs, it finances its own childcare, it finances its own schools, and all of that is done locally. So that is a direct benefit, but that could not be possible without air transport. But not everything has been rosy recently. In 2019 was one of the best years ever for air transport. We'd grown by 5%, passengers carried had grown by 5% the year before. GDP worldwide had grown by 2.7%. We carried in 2019 worldwide 200 million more passengers than we carried the year before. And aircraft were full at 82.5% load factor. So out of 100 seats on an airline, 82.5 are always sold. And then come 2020, the pandemic struck. The number of RPK, so the revenue passenger kilometers, dropped by 66%. GDP decreased by 3.5%. We carried in 2020 2.7 billion less passengers than the year before. And okay, the load factor didn't drop as much as I would have expected, but that was just because there were just so many less flights. So the aircraft were still reasonably full, but there just were no flights. And in fact, we've always said the industry is resilient, and we get through the oil crisis, we got through the gold crisis, we got through the Asian crisis, 9/11, SARS, the financial crisis, and year on year growth continues. But with the pandemic, it very much was interrupted. Growth really dropped completely. So the question, of course, on everybody's mind is, will we fly more in the future? Is that growth going to come back to us? Now, we heard a bit about this in the introduction as well. So what drives air traffic growth, and specifically, what drives air traffic growth on the continent? First of all, the reality is that the economic growth across the continent and in South Africa, economies are growing faster than the world average. In Africa, we have the fastest growing population in the world. We have, and this was touched on earlier, we have urbanization, so more and more people are coming to live in the cities, but also we have an incredible growth of the middle class. The middle class are people that can afford to fly and will fly and want to go and explore. Africa has always been attractive for inbound tourism, but there's also a lot of potential for outbound tourism, people leaving Johannesburg to go and explore Europe, go and explore Mauritius, well, although Mauritius is still part of Africa. And there's also, yeah, the intra-Africa tourism. We believe that with the single air transport, African air transport market and the development of low-cost carriers, there will be a lot of potential as well. And what I'm saying is that these are the fundamentals, and despite the pandemic, these fundamentals have not changed. And therefore, we believe that air transport will continue to grow. At Airbus, we have a whole team that analyzes many, many statistics. And we believe that if you compare the number of RPKs flown in 2019, just before the start of the pandemic, we believe that within the next 2 to 3 years, so between 2023 and 2025, we will be back at the level we were in 2019. So for us, air traffic will recover. By 2024, 2025, air traffic will be back to what it was before the pandemic. We run we do what we call a global market forecast, which is an economic forecast that looks 20 years out into the future to analyze what we think will happen to traffic and traffic growth, and then also to tell us, especially Jérôme, how many aircraft we'd be expected to sell over the next 20 years. So what we see is that in Africa and within Africa, we see that traffic will grow by 4.6%. Not 4.6% over 20 years, 4.6% every year for the next 20 years. That's within Africa. Domestic is 4.6, and within the continent, 4.7. Towards Asia Pacific, it's growing even more. It's 5.4%. But you get the picture. For us, all in all, there's going to be a lot of growth. So what this? Sorry. Oh yeah. Sorry, Joe. I'm going through this very quick. And Harry, if he's held up his sign, I haven't seen it yet, so that's good news. But no, all the data that I'm showing you, we have it available on our in the website. You can even get it in an Excel format if you want to go into that level of detail. But what we're looking at, so in 2019, there were 690 passenger and freighter aircraft in service in Africa, and these are aircraft over 100 seats. By 2041, so in 20 years' time from now, we will see a fleet of 1,600 aircraft in service. 370 of those, so the dark blue, are aircraft that were already in service today. 320 will be old aircraft that need replacing, and then 910 aircraft are growth aircraft. So all this growth needs aircraft for airlines to be able to fly these passengers. So what we see is between today and 2041, 1,230 aircraft delivered onto the continent. So that's not really less flying, is it? And what we see when we look at it, we split it up between the small aircraft and the big aircraft. Two reasons for that. These are the two reasons for this number. Okay, that's my 10 minutes. So within Africa, that's where the biggest growth is going to be. It's within the African markets, and it's also the domestic. And for that, we would tend to use smaller aircraft, whereas the wide bodies would be your longer flights. But the other point is that the African carriers, they only carry 20% of the intercontinental traffic. All the traffic that comes in from Europe, from the US, and elsewhere is primarily carried by non-African carriers. So anyway, what can we do right now? Well, Corinne mentioned it. It's what is the quick win? Well, our vision is that airlines require the latest, most efficient and lowest emission aircraft. In 2017, only 5% of the worldwide fleet was aircraft that were the latest generation. When I say latest generation, it's the ones that burn the less fuel. By 2019, that was at 13%. And last year, it was at 20%. The latest generation aircraft. So this is the Airbus latest fourth generation aircraft family. We have the 220, the 320, the 330, and the 350 families. And all of these, compared to the previous generation, burn from 20 to 25% less fuel. So, and burning less fuel means less emissions. So for us, that is the quick win solution, is putting the latest possible aircraft into the market. So, okay, so very quickly, the 220, it's a brand new aircraft. It was a clean sheet design. It has all the latest advancements, and I disagree when Corin said we don't know what we can still do with aerodynamics. We're still improving aerodynamics because the computing power we have nowadays allows us to do calculations that wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. And a lot of the aerodynamics is just computer-generated calculations that allow us to totally optimize the aircraft. We have advanced materials, we have the latest engines, simple systems, and a very comfortable cabin. Okay, the comfortable cabin is not part of the sustainability, but it does make people prefer Airbus. Sorry, I had to get that plug in. So very quickly, the 220-100 has, in a two-class configuration, 116 seats. The 220-300 has 141 seats, very well suited to the intra-Africa markets. And these aircraft can fly up to 7 hours. So from Johannesburg, the 220-300 or the 100, very similar ranges, 7 hours flying time. From Joburg, covers pretty much everywhere that you would want to cover in Africa with a single aisle. Right up to Ouagadougou and of course to Mauritius, domestic down to Cape Town. And always read the small print because we know that Johannesburg, for example, is a challenging airport. It's hot and it's high. That usually affects aircraft performance. So we take that into consideration when we show you these range circles. Now we have the 320. That's actually our bestseller. It's the most successful aircraft family ever. Right now we've sold almost 17,000, and we still have over 6,000 of these aircraft to deliver. This was the original CEO that we started with, but then we improved it as well. So back in 2012, what we did to the original aircraft, the CEO, is we added sharklets. This reduced the fuel burn by 4%. Then in 2015, we introduced the Neo, and we improved the fuel burn by 15% with the new engines. And then now we've enhanced it further by working on the cabin to allow more passengers on board. So now on a per passenger basis, we're 20% less fuel burn per passenger compared to the CEO. So and it's our own aircraft that we're comparing, going from the original aircraft with one engine, doing all the improvements and the new engine on it, we're now saving 20% in fuel. So this is our contribution to the short-term sustainability targets.
At the same comfort standard.
At the same comfort standards, yeah. The same very high comfort standards. Sorry, otherwise I get wrapped on the knuckles by Jean. Now I'm trying to not get wrapped on the knuckles by Harry. So 140 seats on the 319, 165 on the 320, and 206 on the 321 Neo. Very much similar ranges to what I showed you earlier. So again, covers from Joburg, covers all of Africa. Or all the what I would call the single aisle destinations, up to Ouaga, up to Mauritius, very similar. It's just what we say with Airbus is just tell us what size of aircraft you want and we'll make it work for you, because they are totally interchangeable across all the destinations. Now something new. This is the 321 XLR. This is something different because it's an aircraft that's been built to fly long-range, wide-body routes, but at single-aisle economics. So in essence, it has more range than the basic aircraft, better cost per seat, and it's a low risk for certain routes where you wouldn't want to put a 330 or a 350 or a 380 if you'd bought one at the time. You could put this much smaller aircraft to open the route. Oh, thank you. Actually, I'm almost done. Thank you. And just as an example, what could you do? Okay, so this time I'm showing it from Cape Town because remember I said that Johannesburg is a hot and high and it's a difficult airport. But if we take it from Cape Town with the 321 with 172 passengers, you're going to be flying 9 hours into Brazil, as far as Cairo and as far as Dakar as well. It's just to give you an idea of what we can do with these latest generation aircraft. So the 330 Neo you're going to say to me, but why, how can you achieve 25% improvement on the 330neo compared to your CO? Well, what we did was when we improved it, we didn't just put a new engine on it. We retweaked the wing as well using the latest aerodynamics, and we put a lot of 350 technology back into the old aircraft. So all of a sudden, we have the 330CO, which was a great aircraft. We've now got the Neo, which is new engine, new technology. And there again, we've also improved the fuel burn by 25% per seat compared to the previous generation. So again, I know it sounds like a product plug, but what I'm trying to say is, as an immediate solution, bringing down those fuel burns, that is exactly what airlines are looking at. To be fair, they're probably not doing it just for sustainability. They're also doing it to keep the costs down, because the fuel burn is over half of the operating cost of an aircraft is the fuel cost, sometimes more, especially with the way fuel prices are going right now. So I think it's in everybody's interest for the airlines to get the latest possible equipment. So how far can a 330 fly from Johannesburg? Well, the 330 can reach, again, Latin America, all of Europe, and into Australia. For the 330-900, it can reach Perth. For this smaller 330-800, which has more range, 257 passengers from Joburg all the way to Sydney. And then our last product that I'm going to discuss, which is the 350, and my tagline here is the most efficient large wide body. When we started the 350, it was like with the A220, we started with a clean sheet design. We started from scratch and said, right, what can we do? What do we need? Because of that, again, 25% lower fuel cost compared to, let's be frank, our own 340 at the time and 777. We worked on the reliability of the aircraft. It's the flexibility. This aircraft can fly short routes, it can fly long routes. And of course, we did a lot of work on the cabin interior as well to make it as comfortable as possible. So this aircraft can fly from Johannesburg. It's flying just over 13 hours non-stop, reaching from Joburg, reaching most of Latin America, reaching all of Europe, and reaching all of Australia. But then some of you will say, but on your map, you're not showing New York. But we all know that SAA flew the 350 to New York. What I'm showing you here is just a very almost conservative range circle and description of our aircraft. When we look into actual operations and look on specific routes, we find that we can actually fly much further. And SAA, when they did have the 350, they were very happy with their operation to New York using that aircraft. So this is my conclusion slide. As Corin mentioned at the beginning, our motto is we pioneer sustainable aerospace for a safe and united world. And for us right now, for me, on a right now basis, Corin, he is 2050 ahead. I'm right here today. What I'm saying is we have the A220. It was purpose built to be efficient. We have the 320. It was the best seller. It still is the best seller. And we've improved it to come up to today's standards. We have the 330neo with that new generation performance, and we have the 350 in terms of efficiency. For us, that is the quick win solution to put the latest possible aircraft in there while we work together on the other sustainability product topics. So if I may, a conclusion. Internet now. Maybe I can say hello, Mum, at the same time. So I think we'll all agree that air transport is important to Africa. What I haven't put in here, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that also please be aware that Africa is important to Airbus. Myself, I only look after the continent. Jerome only looks after the continent, and we're very, very happy to be here and have this opportunity, not to just give a product plug, but also to discuss with you and network. The other thing is, we're not going to stop flying. So let's put a positive spin on that. The future is bright. Traffic recovery is underway, but more importantly, the fundamental things that drive people's desire to travel, they have not changed. Yes, we were on pause with the pandemic, but we're back and we're flying, and we're going to work together to do that in the most possible and the most sustainable way possible. And that's what I'm saying, you know, that our products right now, our new products, they are sustainable. And to us, replacing old aircraft with the latest generation, be it our latest generation, be it our competitors' latest generation, we're all in this together and we all have solution. And for us, that is, for me personally, it's the most significant lever for decarbonisation in the short term. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jerome, Corin, and you. Saying that Corin is 10 years ahead, I think you're more than 10 years ahead because I'm still excited about my first flight in the 38. And so where does that take us? Anyway, ladies and gents, I think this was great. Sharing this important and interesting information with us. I'm quite sure you're burning now with questions, including the people on Zoom and YouTube. So we're going to take a short 10 minutes comfort break. And when you come back, we will rearrange a little bit here and you'll be able then to ask questions and get some great answers from our gentlemen. The people following on YouTube, you're welcome to text your questions on YouTube. The Zoom people will give you opportunity to unmute yourselves and ask your questions after our break. So thank you. We see you here back again. It's now almost 20, so let's make it 14:30. Go back here in 14:30.
And an incentive to come back on time, we do have some small gifts for you. But if you're leaving now, then you don't get them.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you for returning to the venue. Looking forward now to a very nice questions and answers session. What we're going to do, I hope that on that way here with notepads for you guys to take note as well. So be here in a second. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a question or two from the floor. Depending on the nature of the question, we'll give the panel opportunity to respond. Members of the panel, you're welcome to sit and talk, or you're welcome to stand up and stand there. The reason why I'm doing this is that you can keep an eye on the Zoom people speaking there, and you're also still in view of the camera. That's why we're doing it this way. So you're welcome to stand up and talk there as well if you so choose. All right, so when you ask a question, please identify yourself, just say who you are, where you're from, and then you can ask the question. You can ask a question for one member of the panel or panel as a whole. And please keep it to one question at a time. And let's see how many questions we can get. The people on Zoom, I see there's already questions on Zoom that we will address. So yes, can we have hands for people who want to ask questions, please? So there, that is one person. Just wait for the camera to get to you. And please speak out loud so that everybody can hear you.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Amanda Mbata and I'm doing...
Speak up, please.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Amanda Mbata and I'm doing diploma in logistics. My question is, as Airbus, have you ever considered having electric planes, like planes that work using batteries, less fuel or anything?
Thank you very much for that question. Is there another question from the floor on this stage?
Greetings to everyone. My name is Zandile Lilala, a student in Advanced Diploma in Logistics here at UJ. I'm concerned about, I'm actually quite interested in the supply chain part of your organization, since obviously it's the backbone of the organization. We're talking about the procurement and the contracting, as you mentioned. I want to know what standards do you guys maintain to ensure that you have a sustainable supply chain as an organization?
Thank you for that question. So can the panel respond on these two questions, perhaps?
Can you take those?
Yeah.
Perfect. Keep them coming.
Yeah. I think I'll stand up because I've been reminded, although I knew that my voice isn't very strong, so better that I stand up just to begin with. The first question on electric aircraft. Yeah, it's a good question, and there is a lot of activity in this development area, and Airbus has been very actively involved and continues to be actively involved, because electrification is actually something which can benefit any aircraft, even those which cannot rely exclusively on battery power for their propulsion. So if we're talking about aircraft which rely exclusively on battery power, there's a limit to the carrying capacity and the range capability, so the payload range capability of the aircraft, and such aircraft will be well below the payload range that we typically address with our portfolio. So it's certainly possible, and there are some early electric aircraft out there operational, and it's quite a competitive marketplace. There are quite a few new entrants coming into the market with electric aircraft, but they're typically less than 10 or maybe 20 passengers, something like this. And that's due to the weight of batteries. The energy density of a battery is not competitive with the energy density of kerosene or of hydrogen. As I mentioned earlier, we can use hydrogen to create electricity. So that could be electrical propulsion with a hydrogen source. But we can also do hybridization. And that's something that we're actively looking into. We have a project which I didn't feature in my presentation called EcoPulse. So that's something you can find out about on the Airbus website. And EcoPulse is really specifically dedicated to researching hybridization technology. And so that is on an aircraft which is, I think, is due to fly this year, if my memory serves me correctly. And that's taking a turboprop powered aircraft, adding a large battery, some additional motors, and doing various hybridization research tasks. That could benefit us for our larger aircraft later, because it could then enable us to run the gas turbines on our aircraft more efficiently, whether they are kerosene powered or hydrogen powered. So we can definitely gain maybe 5 or 10% with some relatively light hybridization, using electricity to boost the gas turbine. Okay.
Thank you, Corin.
And I think the second question.
Supply chain sustainability.
Yeah, the second question is probably for me as well. So yeah, the supply chain and what we're doing to ensure that our supply chain is more sustainable. So we have I think it's called a supplier sustainability commitment. It's some kind of engagement that we make with them, which sets the background for the specifics that they want to deliver. And that's something which we are introducing across our supply chain, which is very big, of course. So we have many thousands of suppliers. But what we typically target for these specific initiatives is the top several hundred that represent, I think it's about 80% of our supply chain by value. So still many hundreds of suppliers. So we essentially expect them to make similar commitments to sustainability we do. And some of the specifics are, for example, reporting to Carbon Disclosure Project. There is a monitoring system which is in place as well, where we use an external body to evaluate, to audit is, I think, the right words, the sustainability practices of our suppliers. And actually, that's something where we're cooperating with other industry players. So, for example, our competitor Boeing is also involved in the same working group to develop common standards, so that when a supplier has been audited for its sustainability and received a stamp of approval, if they were a supplier to Boeing and then they wanted to become a supplier to us, they wouldn't need to go through the whole process. So that actually obviously helps to encourage the supplier base to engage more readily with sustainability, if we don't have Airbus asking a bunch of questions one day and then Embraer the next day. So we've been quite pragmatic about it as well. Yeah, so I think that I hope that answers your question. Good.
Thank you, Goran.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's take two questions here from the Zoom platform. The first one, Tumi Lebeya's quite a short question. So Airbus might have influence on its clients' customers. What effort will be done to influence airport owners to enable the refueling of these new aircrafts? And in brackets and the word greenwashing. So what effort will be done to influence airport owners to enable the refueling of these aircrafts? And then, Farai, I don't know if you can unmute yourself and switch on your camera, please. You've got quite a long question. So, Farai, can you unmute yourself, perhaps?
Good afternoon, Harry. Good afternoon, panelists. I hope you can hear me. And just give me a thumbs up.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Thank you very much to all the presenters. I thought it was really insightful. My question is, you've mentioned how Airbus is looking to reduce emissions in the short term through improved fuel burn efficiencies. But also, we know in the short to medium term, as well as long term, sustainable aviation fuels are going to play a key role, perhaps the biggest role in decarbonizing the aviation sector as a whole. And I also know you've touched some work on, or you've touched on some of the work that you've done on SAF globally, but I wanted to know more specifically how Airbus is supporting development and production of sustainable aviation fuels, specifically in South Africa and the rest of the continent. Why I'm asking is, one of the goals that you mentioned at the end talked about fostering inclusion. And I think, there's a real opportunity for the continent as it's growing its aviation sector to make sure that it's doing so sustainably by producing sustainable aviation fuels. Thank you.
Thank you, Farai. So can I respond to these two questions?
Yeah, that's okay.
Sustainability, the field of wind.
Yeah. Nobody's interested in the aircraft. It's all about sustainability.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Farai, for the question. Perhaps if I deal with your question first, Farai. So the sustainable aviation fuel world is building very, very rapidly. What Airbus can do is try to encourage and in some ways, along with many other players, act as a bit of a catalyst for some of the development that needs to take place. So it's actually a story which began over a decade ago. We've been flying with sustainable aviation fuel on an occasional basis since 2010. It's really this year, last year, where things are really accelerating. We are increasing the use of sustainable aviation fuel in our own operations. So we're increasing that to very high levels, but our own operations, and this is flight test, it's delivery of aircraft, it's delivery test flights as well. It's relatively small. We perhaps have a footprint similar to a small airline. And that is really setting an example in terms of ambition. We have some ability to announce specific partnerships. For example, not long ago we announced a partnership with Qantas, where actually Qantas and Airbus have committed a certain sum of money, $100 million in each case, towards a fund which will facilitate the development of sustainable aviation fuel and that industry in Australia. That's because in that particular market, there was a clear disconnect between the likely demand and the visible activity on the ground in terms of development projects. It's not Airbus's interest to become a sustainable aviation fuel producer, but if we can act as a catalyst by helping unblock the potential that exists in some, let's say, energy ecosystems, then partnering with Qantas in that case made sense for us. So it's not impossible that we could do similar things elsewhere, but there's an awful lot going on in any case without Airbus's specific input, and it's a very global activity. I think, as I mentioned earlier, Europe and North America have a little bit of a lead. I know that Africa has a lot of potential, certainly in terms of feedstock for sustainable aviation fuel, and clearly more needs to be done. A bit of a long-winded answer, but I think acknowledging the distribution issue is a good first step. There will be means to manage the distribution issue. So there's a concept called book and claim, for example, and book and claim essentially means that somebody who is willing to use SAF and pay for SAF could actually do so, but another operator would actually use it. And in actual fact, this actually takes place in a small way today. There is a small amount of book and claim activity going on, whereby SAF production that is taking place in California is actually claimed for use by another airline elsewhere. And that SAF is actually put, because it's a drop-in SAF, it's Jet A1, it's completely compatible with the existing fueling infrastructure. That SAF gets put into the fueling system in Los Angeles or San Francisco, I'm not sure which. It's used by an airline that's not even aware that another party has actually paid for that SAF to be produced and is then claiming credit for that SAF when it comes to their own carbon accounting. So those are solutions, but can't rely on that to build up to the scale that we need. And of course, it's much more efficient and easy if SAF is produced close to where it is going to be used. And that's why we should expect to see a SAF industry in Africa, and in South Africa specifically, because I think some of the conditions in South Africa are certainly conducive to production of SAF.
Thank you, Carmen.
The prior question was about airports, and I think it was about airports bringing them on board and having them comfortable and committed to providing new sustainable fuels. So first of all, with regard to sustainable aviation fuel, so many airports are familiar with sustainable aviation fuel today. Having said that, there is not much expected of the airports themselves, because the sustainable aviation fuel used today is what's called drop-in fuel. So essentially, the fuel producer blends it with a fossil fuel, and it can be used, pumped onto any aircraft in a normal way, along with 100% fossil fuel. So that's not so much a challenge. With hydrogen, for our ambition to deliver hydrogen-powered aircraft as from 2045, that would mean quite a significant change for airports, because they would need to be providing hydrogen at a relatively large scale. Having said that, hydrogen is already used today at many airports, because hydrogen is actually a very useful fuel to decarbonize the airport's ground operations. So tow trucks and buses, for example, can be, and in many cases are today, already powered by hydrogen. So it's actually more a question of scaling up the delivery or production of hydrogen as an airport, because hydrogen could even be produced at the largest airports. If not produced, it could come by a pipeline liquefied at the airport for use on board aircraft. And then, of course, there's the delivery from the storage facility onto the aircraft. And those are, of course, significant challenges. And that's why we're already engaging with airports with our work on hydrogen aircraft, because actually we have two big challenges to delivering hydrogen-powered aircraft in 2035. It's getting the aircraft technology mature and working well, but it's also having the hydrogen ecosystem in place so that those aircraft can operate. So we're already working actively with airports in France, Paris, Lyon, but also in Italy, Venice, Hamburg as well. And we're also securing agreements with other airports around the world, some of the major hubs around the world, to start working with them to share expectations and understanding of what will be required.
Thank you, Corin. All right, so there was a question here. So we'll take a question from the floor just a moment. Yeah, the front, second one from the front.
Yeah, mine is similar to the previous two speakers. It's around procurement. Does Airbus procure any inputs, products outside the fuel within Africa? And what is Airbus involvement in terms of the end of the life recycling? Do you buy some of the planes back, or do you get involved in helping to recycle the products or dispose them? What is your practical involvement?
There's two parts to that question.
We'll let Jérôme speak. Sorry about the accent.
Sorry, your first question was, could you repeat please, just to be sure it was the right point?
Do you procure any of your inputs within the continent?
Your input means on our production.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the construction, in production, and also in the construction
Yes.
of the
aircraft.
Yes.
Yes, let's talk locally. Here in South Africa, we produce some part of our aircraft. We have produced some part of our aircraft with Denel. We have also part of manufacturing with Aviation, very nearby. The production of the outsourcing of the production is also linked to our market. Obviously, as we are selling thousands of aircraft in China, we produce more in China than in Africa. The issue we are facing is several. Of course, the market, which is the key driver. Concerning Africa is also the logistic. Your country is very developed, but it's very far from Europe. As if we have to carry to produce something, for example, in Johannesburg, it has to go by truck to Cape Town and then on boat all around, also all around the world to Europe. But yes, we are open, especially here in the country. We have an obligation of setting. I don't know if you are aware of that. It's a law calling NIPP, National Industrial Program Participation. If we lease, if one of our customers who just purchased the aircraft lease an aircraft to a national carrier, and you still have one national carrier, maybe not for long, but you still have it, may move privatized with a strategic investor. And yet we have several programs. For example, today Aviation is a secret source of many parts on our F320. Every F320 in the world fly with parts produced in South Africa. Other countries in South Africa, we have mainly North Africa, which is much more closer to our facility, Morocco in particular. We have a bit of production, but not many things in Ethiopia, and that's all more or less. I will reply to your first part. And the second part, please, was?
The end of their life recycling.
End of the life. Yes, we are very much involved in end of the life. We have two companies. It's not 100% owned by Airbus, but you have Airbus, you have CFM, Fancy. We have two bases. One is in Tarbes, nearby Toulouse, and the other location is in Spain. And they are end of the life. It's a large business. Because you have really three business. First business is to park the aircraft, waiting for the aircraft to be remarketed to another operator. And you park the aircraft. On the same location, you you do second-hand parts business. The aircraft park, you take some LRU, line replaceable unit, you do the maintenance and you lease it. And when you need the aircraft, you fit the aircraft again. And then you have totally scrapping of the aircraft. A total scrap of the aircraft is you recycle some parts, electronics, and you melt the aluminium and things like that. Location is very important. We study the possibility. I have a full business plan for a project like that in South Africa. And at the beginning, for example, our location was Uppington Airport. Very large runway, very large space to park the aircraft, but uneconomical. Why? Because it was very far away from the melters. And I think at the end, we finalized the project work with parking the aircraft and dismantling the aircraft in Polokwane, because it was closer to the melting. And it was part of one of our NIPP proposal, and it was a big deal with SM. We have also sustainable fuel, school, etc. But yes, of course, we focus a lot, and even more now. Now we focus on the recycling the aircraft from the very beginning at design stage. Very easy with aluminium airframe, a bit more challenging with carbon fiber aircraft. But we have solutions. The carbon fiber aircraft we are just delivering now, and the solution will be for in 25, 30 years.
Thank you, Jerome. President Padiachi, I don't know if you can switch on your camera perhaps and ask your question. Will it be possible?
Good day, guys. I'm Preston from Sutori Consulting Engineers. I work as an airport engineer. I have a question for Mr. Corin Higgs relating to the hydrogen as a source of fuel. Considering that the A380 production has come to an end, with the aviation industry moving towards more efficient aircrafts, what is the reasoning behind doing these sort of studies with hydrogen fuel on the A380 instead of something like the A350, which will be the prime aircraft for Airbus? Wouldn't that thus be more comparative and easier to integrate in the future?
Thank you, President.
Yeah, so thank you, Preston. Good question, but it's a fairly straightforward answer, in fact. Quite simply, the A380 is an excellent flying test bed. It's a big aircraft. It flies very nicely, very stable. So from the point of view of the flight test crew.
Camera is there. On top.
Oh, there, right. Yeah, so from the point of view of the flight test crew, it's a great aircraft to work with. You can see that we've mounted that aircraft up on top of the fuselage. That means it's well away from the main engines. So in terms of monitoring the exhaust plume, it's physically quite well separated, which helps. So again, the size of the A380 actually helps to achieve some of those flight test objectives. And also, it's a fourth engine in a way, so although it's a relatively small engine, there will be some impact on the handling of the aircraft. But because the A380 is a large aircraft, the impact relative to the aircraft size is relatively small. So it makes the ideal place to make these tests.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, President. Right, we've got Tim Nkosi Zungu. Tim Nkosi, I don't know if you want to ask your own question, perhaps.
No, I'm fine, thanks. Thanks.
Shall I read your question? So, Tim Nkosi is saying contribution to the question on what standards are used in the supply chain or aviation industry. Like any other sector, aviation is highly regulated industry sector. There is a number of stakeholders that have a mandate to ensure 360 compliance or full compliance. This includes government of the country, I think the Civil Aviation Authority, Federal Aviation Authority, many other key stakeholders within the value chain of the aviation business. And you guys want to respond to that?
Yeah,
I don't see any question.
I didn't see
follow,
it.
but I didn't.
I mean,
Can you repeat, please, Kenny?
What standards are used in the supply chain or aviation industry?
Well, as the questioner says, similar standards apply to various actors in the supply chain in their various tiers. I think what's new for us with regard to sustainability is that some of the sustainability objectives that we have are in addition to the previous standards, which were more concerned with perhaps safety and quality of the product, but not necessarily the impact that that had on the workforce or the local environment or during usage. So it's really adding additional expectations.
Yeah, and we're learning as we go.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And also trying to do that in a way which makes it manageable for everybody. So trying to align with similar standards.
Yeah.
One that I didn't touch on was hazardous substances. So that's actually something where work is still ongoing because there's a lot of knowledge about hazardous substances, but applying the same rules in the same way to everybody will actually be more effective and more quick at actually getting measures in place if everything is harmonized.
Right, ladies and gents, we're running out of time. Is there another last question from the floor? There's a question, and there's one. So we take these two then. So the first one, the gentleman in white.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Wandile Ndimande. I'm currently studying Advanced Diploma in Transportation Management. My question is, we know that Airbus is one of the biggest companies in the world, with Boeing being its biggest competitor. But what projects or graduate programs do you have in place to assist graduates like us here to further our careers in aviation industry in South Africa or Africa in general?
Thank you for that important question. And then the lady just behind you, can you just put up your hand again? That lady there, thank you.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Gertrude and I'm studying diploma in logistics. So I heard everything about the what you guys do, but I wanted to ask, what do you do to give back to the community?
What do you do to give back to the community? So the first question, thank you for the questions. The first question is in terms of education, and the second question is about giving back.
Okay, I've been voted as I haven't had a chance to speak. Oh yeah, sorry, I need to stand up, I'll get closer. So first of all, regarding what we do for graduates, what we want to do. So we are always interested in talent. We're always interested in young talent. What I'll do is afterwards, I'll give you my contact details. What we do, usually we do everything through our website because we want everybody to have the same opportunities. So a lot of things are broadcast and published on the website. I'm not familiar with all of it, but I'll give you the contact details and we can take this conversation offline as well. But yes, obviously we're naturally interested. We have Airbus in South Africa here. We have Airbus helicopters. It's a 100 people organization. They employ locally. We have in our engineering facilities, we have graduate schemes as well. We have a lot in the UK. All of that is always broadcast on the web, but I think it's probably best if we correspond and I'll give you some more specific details. What do we do? What do we give back to the community? We do a lot, but we don't talk about it. We, together with Giron, sometimes we're surprised to learn that something's happened that we weren't aware of because our job is to promote and sell aircraft. What we do for the community, we keep that totally separate from that activity. So I'd prefer not to just give you some examples.
Okay. I'll tell you what we have done in the past, what I've done in the past.
Yeah, let's. He's a better sales guy than I am.
No, but what we're getting back to community, sorry, I don't know. The problem is the possibility we have to give back to community compared to the price of our product is very small. I give you an example. I'm a very big rugby fan. I don't know if some people have rugby fan.
Rugby.
Yeah, rugby.
Yes.
One of my friends from Toulouse played here in South Africa for the Sharks, Frédéric Michalak. At the same time, we were delivering aircraft to South African Airways. What we have done, we have collected rugby shoes in Toulouse, put it in the aircraft, fly it to Johannesburg. I rent a car myself, a truck, for 5,000 pair of shoes. I drive to Durban, and we give the shoes to young kids in the township. The aircraft I delivered cost more $100 million. You think I'm going to the press and say, look how good we are, we have given 5,000 pair of shoes.
Second-hand shoes.
But I can tell you one thing. I saw a young guy, he was almost 10 years old. I gave him a pair of shoes, and look at me, said, I play soccer. I don't care, take it. Okay, another thing we have done, but it's different, is in Congo, on Kinshasa. One of my friends take a kid adoption, and he was terrified by the level of the young kids alone was treated. He created an association in France. He collected a lot of equipment, 10 tons. And the problem is carrying the things. And we find an aircraft on maintenance in France. We put everything in the aircraft, flying back to Congo and give to the
Orphanages.
Okay. But there are small things compared to the price of our aircraft. And again, we do not communicate. We have an Airbus Foundation, means if you have a earthquake somewhere in the world, we put aircraft to Red Cross, available for Red Cross to carry very quickly emergency equipment. Specifically in Africa, we fight against we work with a food program or French Association Aviation Sans Frontières. But in my view, compared to our income and our again, aircraft price is very small. But I try to do it individually, and it's very valuable, believe me. Did that answer the question?
Thank you, Jerome. Much appreciated. Ladies and gents, I don't see any questions on YouTube. We don't have a chance. Okay, we'll start. Let's take the last question then. We'll start.
Today, my name is Ross Clark. My company is Verimet Inspection Services. Most of my work is with minerals, ores, containers, trucks, and ships. Over the years, obviously, we all know about a transformation from coal-powered trains and ships to liquid fuels, to petrol, to diesel, to biofuels, to hydrogen. And all of these have their advantages at the time, but they eventually run their course. I have one question in my mind is what's going to happen to all the batteries in years and years and years to come? Because we've got disposal problems already with the things we use now. Our batteries going in the right direction. We're not going to create more problems further down the line. Quick question for each of you, for Monsieur Jerome. Do we know if recycling carbon fiber generates CO2? Are we going to create another problem for our children and grandchildren in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time? For Corin, and it came from one of your answers, you referred to the A380. The A380 is obviously, from your point of view, a very stable aircraft to test your new designs and so on. What you didn't mention, of course, is that the A380 has reached its nadir, and you've probably got a few spare airframes that you can use for research without building anything special. And a quick one for Corin, for Duke. As I walked in, I was immediately struck. Is there a commercial motive for laying out today's session where you're obviously going to have future travelers and future employees and future scientists, that you've laid it out in the format of a 3x3 A330 rather than a 5 in a line, very inconvenient A380? Are you pushing the A330 sales for the future?
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we can answer. Your first question concerning the recycling of carbon fiber, even recycling of. Today we have a bit of experience, and we are already recycling some carbon fiber. I'm not a specialist again. My job is to sell aircraft, not to recycle the aircraft. I'm at the beginning of the process, and I've been an engineer in my life. Asking what is going to be possible in 30 years is very difficult to answer. I'll give you an example. When I was a design engineer, I worked on titanium and what we call SPF, which is superplastic forming. And when I was 20 years old, it was a month and a half ago. Ouch. We said very, very difficult to use that on an aircraft. And today we have all our engine pylon have SPF titanium on it, but it's very difficult today on the carbon fiber, because we have it already. Even on the 300 20 years ago, we know that it's possible. And don't ask me for what is done as a reuse. The battery, I agree with you. Myself, I have an electrical car in Toulouse. And the battery today, we do not know what to do. But in an aircraft, we will not have big battery because it's too heavy to put it in the air. Answer your question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, one for you.
So yeah,
Again,
for me,
about the 380.
yeah, I think it's more of an observation than the question, but yeah, I mean A380s.
You're still producing A380s for
No,
research purposes?
No, absolutely not.
The point is, when we do, I will reply, sorry. We have in Toulouse on the test aircraft, we have one A320 Neo, one 330 Neo, one 350, and one 380. Our aircraft, we keep it, MSN 1. As Corinne said, the 380, as it was a game changer, a very big aircraft, the biggest aircraft in the world. We have done a huge series of flight tests. When we know the aircraft perfectly, we know exactly how it flies, we know the aerodynamics, we have all the data we want. Then when we use it now as a test bench because we know it perfectly. And when we make a change, we are able to analyze all the change in aerodynamic, fuel, etc. Sorry. Boeing or our colleagues in aircraft in engine manufacturing have done the same. I think it's Rolls-Royce. They have a very old 747-200 on which they put new engine because they know the aircraft perfectly, and then they are able to analyze the change with the new engine. They are able to, the analyses are very key for us. We do not have, welcome to come to Toulouse. If you want to see a good rugby team, it could be a good trip. Come in November, we will have the South African team touring in Europe. In Toulouse, we do not have white air. We manufacture the aircraft which has been ordered and paid. And we do not have stock. And we have only one A380 remaining, and we use it.
Thank you. Ladies and gents, what we're going to do is we're going to ask our panelists for closing remarks. We can start here with Corin and then you, and then Gerard. Closing remarks.
Yeah, I didn't get to reply to my question.
Last chance.
No, what I tried to cover was all the products that we have, which are all the latest generation ones. But now that you mention it, when I look at the market projections for the African market, I would see the 220 as an ideal single aisle just from its size and range capability. And in terms of the 330 Neo, for me, for that small percentage of wide bodies that we need on the continent, it would make more sense than the 350. And indeed, it's what we're seeing with Air Senegal, Uganda Airlines, Air Mauritius. They already have chosen the 330 Neo for their operations. So yeah, that's, if I was plugging products, that's what I would be plugging. When I talk to airlines, when we talk to airlines, we come to them with our full portfolio and try and understand really what their needs are. And that's how the conversation goes.
supporting you, and it's a very comfortable layout.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we now take the closing remarks from our panel?
Okay, thank you, Harry. So I guess my reflection really is well, first of all, thank you for your interest. I think it's encouraging that that the university is taking an interest in sustainability, because it's a key subject for the future. It's a serious subject. And I think maybe what we've talked about has further convinced you, if you weren't already, that it's a subject that Airbus takes seriously. It's not just a subject for communication. So sustainability is something which we need to have in our strategy. Any company, any big organization that doesn't have a sustainable strategy is not a serious company these days. We don't have a strategy and address sustainability as a separate issue. Sustainability needs to be part of the strategy. The strategy has to be sustainable. And I hope we've convinced you that we are doing everything we can to develop a sustainable strategy for ourselves, but also help the aviation industry do the same.
Indeed. Thank you, Corin.
I'm going to go off topic. I'm going to talk to the students, the young people here. Sorry, younger than us. I joined Airbus 27 years ago, and I came in as an engineer, and I started in marketing, and I am absolutely passionate about what I do. And I think that you've picked that up from the people at Airbus here as well. We're all passionate. So what I'm going to say is, whatever's going on, whatever your dream, stick with it, keep at it, and do what you enjoy, and you won't regret it. Sorry, I just wanted to take that opportunity.
Important, thank you.
I will close on the local sustainability, giving you an example I know very well. I work on the South African market for 12 years now. And obviously my main focus has been for many, many years, South African Airways. South African Airways had 40 aircraft, 40. And you're probably aware about the difficulty they had, and now we are working on a new plan. Let's say if South African Airways, we start with 40 new fourth generation aircraft, immediately day one, their fuel consumption, their CO2 emission will be reduced by almost 20-25% in one day. You can see the change of technology on that, efficiency. Just how is it important? And this is Airbus' responsibility. We had a lot of questions. What are you doing on staff, etc., etc. Our first responsibility is to provide aircraft which are safe, but cannot be discussed, and capable to accept the fuel and the new possibility we have in terms of carburant, fuel in the market. And Airbus, we are working, sorry, Corinne, it's a bit on your strategy. We are working on fuel producer, but it's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is on the aircraft, on the platform. I will compliment on you. Yes, follow your dream. Come to our industry. Involve yourself in our industry. Involve yourself in the community. Bring your community on board our aircraft, in airline, in engineering, in production. And the sky is the limit. And we're in the sky. Come with us. Have a good day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Give a panel in. Ladies and gentlemen, before I ask Andre to close for us, just remember that the presentations we saw here today will be uploaded to the Transport website. By tomorrow noon, it will be available for you to download. So this website you see here on the banner as well. You can take a picture of that. It's transportsig.com. Transport Special Interest Group, SIG.com. You sign up as a user on that website. You should not be a user yet. It's complimentary. Sign up as a user, you go to events, you go to downloads, and you'll see this is a simple little research engine that you can search actually through more than 900 presentations presented over the past 15 years. But if you go to category, you can select today's date and bring up all today's presentations. You can download for free. So you're welcome. If you struggle, send me an email and I'll help you. Right. But thank you very much for your attendance today. I would like to have Elmarie to our host to close the session. Thank you, University of Johannesburg, for hosting us.
Can I just stand here?
Yes, it's fine.
All right, so thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining the session today. I know there's a lot of students here, so I'm sure it must have sparked some interest somewhere, and maybe for future studies. We would like to see you return and study. It's also no coincidence that they asked me to open today, because aviation is also one of my passions. And I'm also lecturing on that subject to the students. And I also would like to thank you guys from Airbus for coming today and sharing your time with us. It's really appreciated, and I think it was very insightful. I think we learned quite a lot of things that we didn't know. So thank you very much for that. And then just on a lighter note, I can't say that I'm as excited as Harry, because I have never been on the A380, but I have been on an A330. So
it will still be, the 380 will still be flying for quite some time.
Probably I'll get a chance someday, but thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, UJ.